Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too. All right. Welcome into this week's episode. Hopefully you had a great Thanksgiving. We are in the final month of the year. It's a fun time of year. It's a busy time of year, that's for sure. But it is definitely a good time of year. Getting to do a lot of stuff with family, get to see a lot of people, relatives from out of town that you don't normally get to see. And then, of course, there's always going to be all the good food, right? Now, starting now, probably, and if not now, probably in the next couple of weeks, you're probably going to start looking towards New Year's Eve, right? New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, 2024. You're starting to plan your year, right? And unfortunately, when we set New Year's resolutions, we don't always follow through with them, right? And that could be for a variety of reasons, but the biggest thing is because you're most likely not clear on what it is you want. And I'm gonna be a little bit more specific on this because you can read there's a lot of great books on this, a lot of great articles, podcasts, things like that on finding your why, right? Finding your purpose, finding why you want to do something, why it is you want to do what you say you want to, right? And I think a lot of times people don't dig deep enough, right? And so there's typically probably not one thing you want to accomplish. There's not just one thing you want to do. There's probably multiple things you want to do. And if you're like me, you try and do them all at the same time. And then you get frustrated because you're not really making progress on anything, right? You set 3, 4, 5 goals for yourself, or maybe you're trying to read a book and another book comes along. And instead of finishing the first book, you start the second book, and now you're reading 3 or 4 pages at a time in each book. And that's a habit that I've gotten into. And I think, oh yeah, I'm going to learn better this way, but I know I don't. But yet I continue to do it, right? But why is this, right? Because at times I think we get very impatient. We think we have to get to the goal as quickly as possible. But one thing that I like to try and do is I try and rationalize with myself is it something that I really want? If I wanted to get, let's say I'm reading a book and I planned on it taking me a month, right? I read a few pages a day, something like that. Maybe I read a little bit at night, and I plan on it taking me a month. If it took me 3 months and I decided not to read it because it took too long, then I probably didn't really want to read it that much in the first place, right? And so the same thing kind of goes here for if you think about your fitness, you think about your nutrition, you think about you're trying to build muscle, you think you're trying to lose weight, things like that. If you had a goal to get there in 3 months, and yet it's most likely going to take 6, you've already hit that 3-month mark. You're not quite there yet. And you realize it's probably going to take a little bit longer. What do? You start working towards another goal? Do you realize, hey, maybe my timeline was off a little bit? Or do you just give it up? Try something else. Maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe I didn't want to read that book. Maybe I didn't want to lose weight. But chances are that's not true, right? You started the book for a reason. You started your diet for a reason. You started going to the gym for a reason. Sometimes we just get impatient. And so we have to decide what we want, but then how much we really do want it, and find that deeper reasoning underneath that, right? And so somebody asked me the other day about muscle building, fat loss. They started a program, and this is a topic I've touched upon before in posts. I've done some Facebook Lives, but this is very common. So this is something that I even have to talk to my own clients with. And so I worked with a client. Over the summer, and he lost quite a bit of weight. Was very adherent to the program, checked in regularly. And then about 10 weeks in, he decided he wanted to kind of switch it up, start, instead of focusing on weight loss, he wanted to focus on muscle building, which is completely fine, right? But I had some notes from when we first met, when we first talked, and he had kind of said to me he had gone back and forth, right? He had gone through, weight loss phase, he had gone through bulking phases, muscle building phases, and then had never really quite seen a lot of progress. And so I kind of wrote that down. And so when I had a conversation with him, he had lost, I think, 20 pounds in 10 weeks or something like that. It's a great. Typically, if you can lose 1 pound a week, that's great. That's great progress. And he was losing, he was averaging like 2 pounds a week. So obviously he was making a lot of great progress, a lot of results there. But he still wasn't where he wanted to be. But he started to see himself differently. He had always been a pretty strong guy, always had quite a bit of muscle. And then once you lose, 20, 25, 30 pounds, you start to see yourself very differently. And sometimes it takes a while to adjust to that. And I go through this myself. There are many times where I go through a bulking phase, and then I end up cutting it short because I don't like the way I look in the mirror anymore. I feel like I put on too much weight. I can't see my abs anymore. My arms aren't as defined, things like that. And so then I go back into a cut phase, and then I feel like I'm getting too small. My arms are too small, all this stuff. And then I go back to the bulk phase, and then I just spent the last 6 months getting nowhere. Right. And so that's what I had to talk to my client about. Is you've done this before, right? You've kind of seen how that worked out, and your initial goal was fat loss, and so you could switch it up. This is your program. This is your life. But what I would recommend is continuing to cut weight until you are satisfied with how you look, and then we'll focus on um, building muscle, right? And so somebody reached out to me asking me, he said he'd been following the program for a while, seeing pretty good results, but wasn't quite sure whether or not he should focus on muscle building, whether he should focus on fat loss first. And to simply put it, to break it down on which you need to focus on more is, one, what's more important to you? Two, which one motivates you more? If it doesn't motivate you, if you're not excited about it, you're not going to be able to stick to it as long. And then three, what's the one that is kind of the most logical, I guess. And so if you're somebody who, has 50, 60 pounds to lose or maybe more, then focusing on muscle building right now probably isn't the answer, right? If you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of weight to lose, you're a naturally lean individual, or you've already lost quite a bit of weight, then muscle building is going to be your answer there. And so you can definitely do both, especially when you start working out. If you're somebody who's never worked out in the past before, you are going to be able to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. You may have come across this, maybe researching on Google or something. It's called like newbie gains, right? It's kind of a phenomenon when you first start working out. When you start building muscle, you can lose fat, build muscle simultaneously. But as your body adapts, this is no longer possible, right? And so you kind of have to choose. And if you're doing both, you're kind of pulling at both ends. Think of like, tug of war, like when you were a kid, you're playing with your friends or something. You get a bunch of guys on one side, a bunch of guys on the other side. You're pulling back and forth, going back and forth. And then whichever one's stronger, whatever side is stronger, whichever side, can outlast the other one is going to eventually win, right? And so if you're trying to lose weight and build muscle at the same time, eventually one of them has to give out. But unfortunately, most of them are about the same strength. So you don't really end up anywhere. You kind of go back and forth the entire time, right? You may do a couple of weeks. Oh man, I start lifting in the gym. I'm getting stronger. And then, I think I want to cut. I think I want to, maybe maintain for a little bit. The most important thing to do is stay with something consistently, right? Well, no matter what that is. And so what I recommend, the population I work with dads. Most of them come to me looking to lose weight. And so every dad that I've worked with that follows the program consistently gets leaner, gets stronger, and gets healthier. And so that's my goal for them, right? That's the goal we set out for each other, right? They want to lose weight, they want to get in a workout routine, and they want to get healthier, right? They want to spend more time with their kids. They want to have more energy, and that's exactly what we focus on. And so, how are they able to get stronger while losing weight? Well, a couple things here. One, just because you're losing weight doesn't mean you have to change up your workout routine. Your workout routine, whether you're losing weight, whether you're maintaining, whether you are gaining weight, is going to look fairly similar, right? If you are gaining weight, if you're trying to bulk, if you're trying to put on muscle size, you may add a few sets here and there, but you don't have to, right? So the workouts are going to look pretty similar. And so one way to know if you're losing muscle or fat, this is a very general gauge, but it works very well. If you are, let's say you are 170 pounds, or let's just say 200 pounds for, so I can remember what I said. If you're 200 pounds, and let's say you are bench pressing 185 pounds, okay? Then you lose 15 pounds, you're 185 pounds, and you are bench pressing 200 pounds. You know that the weight that you lost was fat, almost certainly, because you are getting stronger and losing weight. So that means the weight that you did lose was fat. Now, if you weigh 200 pounds and you're benching 185 pounds, and then you lose 15 pounds, so now you're 185 pounds, and you are bench pressing 185 pounds, now you probably lost a combination of maybe some muscle, maybe some fat there. Most of that's still probably fat, right? So that's still our gauge there. Now, if you're 200 pounds, you lose 15 pounds, you're bench pressing 185 pounds. And now once you get down to 185 pounds, your bench press decreases to 165 pounds. You can't lift as much. Now you can be certain that the weight you did lose was muscle because you're not as strong anymore. And so when you first start, when you're trying to cut weight and you start a weightlifting program, you're going to get stronger, right? You may not necessarily get bigger, right? Because you're not fueling your body for that, right? If you had a bunch of excess calories, you're eating a lot more than you normally do, or even just a little bit more, and you're working out, you're training hard in the gym, then a lot of those calories are going to be used to help build muscle. So you can build strength, you can build size, right? That's how you're going to build size. You're going to build muscle. When you are in a calorie deficit and you're strength training, you might not necessarily get bigger muscle wise, but you can still get stronger. And so you still are building muscle. You still are getting stronger. And so how can we build muscle? We can increase our strength, right? And so at some point, once you're in a calorie deficit, you start getting leaner and leaner. It's going to get much more difficult to continue to increase the weight on all your lifts, right? If you're just starting out, or if you even for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you can continue to increase the reps in the gym. I'm currently in a fat loss phase, and I am getting stronger on the key lifts that I'm doing. And so that to me is saying that the weight that I am losing is fat. And so that's a pretty good gauge. Now, like I said, if you are always trying to build muscle and always trying to lose fat at the same time, then you're kind of pulling from both ends. It makes it hard. It does make it hard to see progress, right? But you can still build strength. You can still get stronger. You should still do your workouts, right? If you weigh 200 pounds and you're not weightlifting at all and you lose 20 pounds, you're now at 180 pounds. So you're going to be leaner, but you can be assured that some of that weight you lost was muscle because you're not strengthening, you're not getting any stronger there. And so that's why it's really important to make sure that you're eating enough protein. Protein is going to help build muscle. It's going to help repair muscle. And in a calorie deficit, it's going to help maintain your muscle. And so one of the biggest things you can do when you are trying to lose weight is to make sure you are strength training. So strength training, getting enough protein in, and making sure you're getting enough rest there, right? When you're in a calorie deficit, your sleep is not going to be as good. And so that's going to affect your recovery, right? You may notice sometimes when you are in a weight loss phase that you wake up more. You're a little bit more restless at night. You may be colder at night. So that's all going to affect your sleep, right? That's going to affect your sleep. It's going to affect the amount of sleep. It's going to affect the amount of rest you have. And then that's going to show up in the gym too. And so for my clients, what I like to do is we typically shoot for 3 workouts a week, 3 45-minute workouts. Some clients only have time for half an hour. That's okay. If you can get 30, 45 minutes, an hour, 3 times a weekend, that is plenty. You are going to see great results. And then so on those other days, what you're going to do is you're going to make sure you're eating in a calorie deficit. You're going to make sure you're hitting a step goal. And so the step goal is, one, for your overall health. It's very important to, just get outside and get moving. But 2, it's going to help the process a little bit quicker, right? Could you lose weight from walking 2,000 steps a day, not working out, and just focusing on nutrition? Absolutely. But you are going to burn more calories through your workouts. You are going to burn more calories through the amount of movement that you're doing. And so the workouts are not meant to be the driver of fat loss. That's going to come with nutrition. Your workouts are going to help build strength. They're going to improve your health. They're going to improve your body composition. But the 2 combined is going to speed up the process, right? When you combine the nutrition, when you combine the workouts, the physical activity, it's going to make the process smoother. Now, when you decide it's time to switch, that's up to you. General rule of thumb for me is once I get to a point where when maybe you get to that point where you're pretty lean, and you feel okay, I feel good, then you can start focusing on bulking up, focusing on getting stronger. But sometimes, actually a lot of times, unfortunately, people never get to this point. People never get to this point because they don't take the process. They don't see the process through. They start working out. They're eating a calorie deficit. They're making progress. They're losing weight, and then it starts to slow down a little bit, and then they get frustrated, and they're not quite as muscular as they'd like to look. And so instead of eating in a calorie deficit, then they start lifting weights and start trying to, just bulk up. And then while you are adding muscle, while you're bulking up, you're also adding some fat. That's just part of the process. And so I personally try and do phases. If I'm doing a fat loss phase, try and stick it out for 12 weeks. If you have a significant amount of weight to lose, you could do this for 6 months. It does not mean you have to be in a calorie deficit the entire time. 12 weeks is a pretty good range there. And then you could take maybe a couple weeks at maintenance and then work your way back down into a calorie deficit and continuing to go through that cycle until you get to your desired weight. Same thing goes for muscle building. Muscle building, strength gain is a much, much slower process. And so you're going to want to be in a calorie surplus here for probably 6 months or so, to be honest. If you could do it for 8, you're going to be able to gain more muscle, right? The longer you can do it, the more muscle you're going to build. Muscle, 2 pounds a month. 2 pounds a month is great progress for muscle building. And so that'd be 24 pounds a year. If you could add 24 pounds of muscle in a year, that would be incredible. It's probably going to be much slower for a lot of people, but like I said, if you are just starting out strength training, you can absolutely gain muscle and strength very quickly. But just like anything, everything does slow down, right? Fat loss will slow down, muscle building slows down, your strength will slow down. And then it's just working how to maintain that. And so what I would recommend for most people trying to lose weight, trying to get stronger, trying to look better is to, one, figure out kind of where you are now, have an honest assessment as to where you are. If you are somebody who needs to lose a significant amount of weight, then fat loss is probably your play here, right? If you are somebody who has already lost a lot of weight or does not need to lose a lot of weight, then yes, focus on muscle building, focus on strength. And it doesn't mean you have to get just really big and muscular. You could just strength train and eat at maintenance level, and you're going to improve your body composition, right? And so strength training is always going to be key. The step goal is always going to be key. Nutrition is going to be key no matter what your goal is, right? Even when you're trying to put on size and muscle, you don't just want to eat as much as you can all the time. A lot of times what happens when people try and build muscle is they stop caring about their nutrition. They just eat whatever because they think, oh, all these calories are going to fuel my body. But the truth is you don't have to be in that big of a deficit, that big of a surplus in order to gain muscle. And the bigger surplus you are, your body's going to store a lot of that. So a lot of times people will do, when they bulk, when they do a muscle building phase, they end up adding a lot of fat, and then they have to lose a lot more once they start their cut phase again. And so even if you are in a muscle building phase, you still want to make sure that you're practicing good nutrition habits. And so hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was enough detail. If you have any questions about this, this is something that, to be honest, it comes up with almost every single client I've ever worked with. And the ones that are able to stick to the process, the ones that are able to follow through, the ones that are able to rely on me as their coach to help keep them accountable, to help, talk them through some of these things, are the ones that end up seeing great results. That client I mentioned earlier, who I worked with over the summer, he ended up losing 26 pounds in 12 weeks. Because he stuck with the process, right? And at times, he wanted to shift it. He wanted to try something different, but that's why I was there to help him. He ended up seeing great results. And so, no matter what your goal is, just stick with it. Stay consistent. Try not to pull from both ends, right? If you're losing weight, if you need to lose weight and you're in a calorie deficit, stick with it. Stick with it for a significant period of time, and so you can see those results. And then while you can still get stronger, you can still improve your body composition. And the cool thing is that when you do get leaner, you're going to look stronger too, right? If you've already built that muscle, or you're starting to build that muscle while you're losing weight, while you're slimming down, once you get to your goal weight, it's going to look a lot better, and you're going to like the way you look and feel and perform every day a lot more than if you waited to start training and start lifting weights and start getting stronger until you got to your desired weight loss goal. And so stick with the strength training. If you don't have equipment, you can start with body weight at home. You can start with the resistance band. Stick with the step goal and stick with the nutrition. That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.